Hello everybody, my name is Marius and this is the English version of my Game of Thrones related videos. For more videos but not in English, click on the link below. So, today we will talk about Robert's Rebellion, the one that took place about 14 years before the events in the books or the show. We'll talk about what happened, who was involved, why it happened, what was the order of the battles, and what were the repercussions of this rebellion. We will mostly touch upon the aspects you will not encounter during the series, but we will not get into absolute details such as who killed this lord or that lord, nor will we name characters that you might never encounter in the show. Having said that, let's begin. This war has two different names, depending on who tells the story. For one side, the Targaryens would call it the War of the Usurper, while the Baratheon side calls it Robert's Rebellion. The truth is that Aerys Targaryen had begun to annoy and upset many of the Westerosi lords long ago. Among these, maybe the most important one, was his own son Rhaegar Targaryen. Probably the best suited name for these events would be the fall of the Targaryen dynasty, or better yet, the fall of Aerys, since in fact Robert Baratheon is a bit Targaryen as well, even if you don't hear about it in the show. His grandmother was in fact a direct aunt to Aerys, and Oris Baratheon, the forefather of the Baratheon house, was himself a half-brother to Aegon Targaryen the Conqueror. No matter how you look at things, these events changed the face of Westeros. Officially, everything started with Lyanna Stark's abduction by Rhaegar Targaryen in 282. The events succeeded each other at a very fast pace. Brandon Stark, Lyanna's brother, was on his way to Riverrun, where he would marry Catelyn Tully, the same Catelyn Tully that would later be Ned Stark's wife. While on this journey, he receives news of his sister's abduction, and being halfway to the royal capital, he decides to go to King's Landing with all the men he already had with him. Among these was Eldred Arryn, a direct nephew of Jon Arryn, Lord of the Vale and Warden of the East. The same Jon Arryn that was raising Robert and Ned. Eldred Arryn was also sole heir to House Arryn, since Jon Arryn never had any children, even though he had been married twice already. Once they reach the Red Keep, in a scene very similar to the one in the movie Troy, Brandon Stark yells at Rhaegar in front of the city wall to come out and die. King Aerys arrests him and condemns him for conspiracy against the prince. He then sends a raven to Winterfell so that Rickard may come and get his son. But once Rickard arrived, he is also arrested and trialed for treason. Both Starks are found guilty and Rickard demands trial by combat. King Aerys agrees, but being the Mad King, he chooses a very special champion, that one being fire. Rickard Stark is hanged from a beam atop a great fire, while Brandon is right there with a strangling device around his neck and a sword in front of him. He is told that if he manages to get the sword, he will be allowed to free his father. He tries to get the sword, but suffocates while at it. He dies strangled, and Rickard dies baked in his own armor. Everyone present that came with the Starks, aside Ethan Glover, is killed, including Eldred Arryn. I think part of these scenes have already been filmed, but are not yet broadcasted. We seem to glimpse parts in Bran's Season 6 super flashback visions. After the death of the two Starks, Aerys realizes that he needs to eliminate any possible repercussions, not being aware of what might follow. He sends a raven to the Vale, ordering Jon Arryn to execute both Robert and Ned. What Aerys did not know is that the two were as sons for Jon. More so, Aerys had killed the heir to House Arryn. Thus Jon does not accept the order, he calls his banners and the rebellion begins. Although not everyone in the Vale sides with Jon Arryn, since not everyone wants to fight the crown. Thus it sparks a civil war within the Vale. In order to unite with all friendly forces, Robert needs to get to Storm's End and Ned to Winterfell. Thus the main objective is sending the two to their respective castles. This is a very complicated task, as the only way of exiting the Vale at the time was by sea, the Bloody Gate being occupied. So the solution is the harbor of Goldtown. The only problem is that Goldtown has just sided with the crown. Facing the blockade, the two separate. Ned decides to go alone and crosses over the Moon Mountains, while Robert takes part in the taking of Goldtown, the first real battle of the rebellion. It is the moment when most men see the force and courage that Robert will display in battle. On the other side, on his way to Winterfell, Ned requires the aid of a fisherman in order to pass the Bight. During a storm, the fisherman dies, and it is his daughter that finishes the journey with Ned, thus being born yet another legend about the origins of Jon Snow. Eventually, both arrive at their respective castles and call their banners. Just like in the Vale, not all Stormlander lords side with Robert. In fact, 3 did the exact opposite, out of which 2 will later join him as allies. Robert discovers that the 3 opposing armies will converge on Summerhall, so he decides to take his troops and fight them before they meet each other within the city. This way, he manages to defeat them all by fighting them separately. This day becomes a legendary day in which Robert defeated 3 armies. During this time, the Crown forces also start to gather. The main allies of the Crown were the Lannisters, the Martells, and the Tyrells. The next battle takes place at Ashford. This is the battle in which Robert is defeated by the Tyrell army. This is also due to the fact that the Reach had and has the largest army in the land. This is the only defeat for Robert in the entire rebellion. The leader of the Tyrell army is none other than Sam's father, Randyll Tarly. Although defeated, Robert manages to escape and retreats further north at Stony Sept. What follows is probably the biggest mistake of the Loyalist force. The Tyrell army, instead of following on Robert, decide to lay siege to Storm's End, the Baratheon seat, which was being defended by Stannis and his forces. Thus Robert manages to successfully retreat to Stony Sept, and the only force to actually go after him is the royal army. But before the army manages to get there and actually catch him, Robert receives his reinforcements from Ned and Jon Arryn, along with the Riverland army and the Tullys. The Tullys, Starks and Arryns had just allied through 2 marriages, Ned with Catelyn and Jon with Lysa. Lysa had been married to Jon because Jon had no heirs, even though he had been married twice. But Lysa was proven to be fertile, as she already got pregnant once with Littlefinger. The importance of this is that both were political marriages and not necessarily loved ones. When the Loyalist army reaches Stony Sept, it was being led by Lord Cunnington, the Hand of the King at the time. We don't get to see him in the series, but in the books he's pretty important, his story being at times merged with various other characters. The army reaches Stony Sept, but Cunnington, instead of just burning the city, as Tywin Lannister would do, he decides to be more methodical, going from house to house to find Robert. When the rebel forces led by Ned arrive into town, the Sept rings its bells, letting people know that a battle will follow. This battle at Stony Sept will also be known as the Battle of the Bells. This victory is extremely important. It underlines the second major Loyalist error. Instead of leveling the city, they went slow and methodical, allowing Robert to regroup. After the victory, Aerys understands that Robert is no longer just a pushover or a small lord rebelling with no cause, and for the first time is actually scared. He sends Gerald Hightower to get Rhaegar from the Tower of Joy. Rhaegar returns and assembles a new royal force. He also convinces Aerys to send a raven to Tywin Lannister at Castle Rock, asking him for help. What many people don't know is that Tywin Lannister was the Hand of the King for Aerys Targaryen, those being the best 20 years of Aerys' reign. But Aerys' action made Tywin extremely unhappy with him. The raven reaches Castle Rock, but there is no answer from Tywin. The next major battle is the one at the Trident, the name of the area being inspired by the confluence of 3 rivers. This is the battle where Rhaegar dies at the hands of Robert Baratheon, and it is also the battle where the royal forces are obliterated. We get the full description of Rhaegar's death as Robert buries the pointy end of his hammer into Rhaegar's chest, the scene climaxing as all the rubies from Rhaegar's armor are scattered by the impact and all men around stop to collect them. Another important scene on the Trident is when Robert meets Barristan Selmy. With both of them injured, Robert chooses to send his maester to help Barristan Selmy first and then himself. This deed increases Robert's image as a fair and kind-hearted lord, as Barristan was a member of Rhaegar's Kingsguard. After the Trident, Robert is injured and remains behind, while Ned goes to lay siege to King's Landing without knowing that Tywin Lannister had already reached the city and taken it. When Tywin reaches the gates, claims to be loyal to the crown and is allowed inside. But once past the walls, he takes the city by storm, killing civilians and royal forces alike. He sends Gregor Clegane the Mountain to kill Elia Martell and her babies, after which the Lannister forces head to the throne room. Aerys hears about the treason and orders the burning of the city, but Jaime kills the pyromancer who received the order and then proceeds to kill Aerys Targaryen. Thus, the Kingslayer then sits the Iron Throne waiting. After a short time, Ned reaches the room. He finds Jaime on the throne, and the later one says, "I was just keeping it warm for our friend Robert." Finally, Robert reaches King's Landing and is presented with the bodies of Targaryen children. Robert is happy with the result, but Ned is mad, saying that they were only children, to which Robert replies that all he sees is dragon spawn. This is the only major argument the two will have over the years. At this point, Ned decides to take the rest of the army and heads to Storm's End to lift the Tyrell siege. He reaches the castle and the Tyrell bend the knee when they find out what happened in King's Landing. Ned now takes a few of his men, 6 to be more precise, and rides to the Tower of Joy. How did Ned find out that Lyana was at the Tower of Joy? We don't know. Maybe from the Tyrells, maybe from hearsay. Or maybe we'll find out later. Upon reaching the tower, this is when you should check the Tower of Joy video, which will be up very soon. The main result of the event is that it manages to end the feud between Ned and Robert. What unites them is the common love they both had for the late Lyana. The last episode of the rebellion is the taking of Dragonstone, when Stannis is sent there to capture the last Targaryens. He reaches the island, but both Dany and Viserys had already been taken by Willem Daddy to the east. Robert becomes king, Ned becomes warden of the north, and Cersei marries Robert, and everybody is happy. In the following years, there is one more rebellion by Balon Greyjoy, but Robert wins this one as well. And there are no other major events until the books or the show starts. And that is about all for today, and all about Robert's Rebellion. I hope you liked it, and if you did, know that soon more clips will follow. They are already made, I just need to do the voiceover in English. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until the next video, I can only wish you happy throning.